there was a bizarre story, I consider it somewhat bizarre, that the USDA, the U.S. government, was involved in a program that tested on cats, kittens really, that it acquired from the Asian meat market, which in itself is bizarre, but I guess they were buying these animals in bulk, and then they were being tested upon here in this country for a specific illness that they were trying to, in essence, produce in these animals. So one of the things that there are a lot of weird stories that come out of this main story, but one of the things that comes out of it is, okay, it sounds pretty horrible, but does it lead to anything productive at the end of that? And the answer is no. And so in what is an ending that no one would have predicted, finally the US government has stopped this. I say that because they haven't stopped a lot of other sort of heinous animal testing, and we'll talk about that with our guest. Our guest is from PCRM, an organization that's dedicated to educating on just these matters. John Pippin is his name. And hello, Dr. John Pippin. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for asking. I'm glad to be here.
You know, Doctor, you are someone who, you are a doctor yourself, as I say, and you know a lot about this world of medical school and medical testing and results that produce education as well as breakthroughs. Why would the U.S. government be involved in a program like this that involves cats and kittens? What was this program? And then I want to generalize. We'll get from this to the general question as to whether animals should be used in medical experimentation at all.
Yeah, that's the question, really. The U.S. government, in all its manifestations, not just the USDA, but the FDA, the NIH, institutes, the Environmental Protection Agency, and so on, have for decades been involved in spending taxpayer money for experiments that have not only been unproductive, but have been directed toward the benefit of private interests, such as big agriculture, big pharma, universities who need the federal support to keep their doors open, and so on. The kitten research is one example, the most recent example, particularly egregious. The Physicians Committee was not directly involved in turning that around, but what's remarkable to us is that the federal government immediately caved and issued a statement saying that this research was not consistent with their mission. That really makes you wonder, why did someone have to blow the whistle on this research in order for them to stop it? It had been going on for 37 years.
For 37 years, they were buying cats from these various places and doing these operations on them?
Well, they were breeding the cats, but they were feeding them infected meat.
Oh, and that's what came from Asia, you're saying?
Yeah. This campaign has been very intelligently waged by an organization called White Coat Waste Project and a former USDA veterinarian named Jim Keel. As I said, my organization was not directly involved, but we have been involved and are involved with numerous other similar situations where government agencies just are operating almost independently of the public will and spending public money for a useless experiment that, oh, by the way, happens to harm and kill thousands and thousands of animals.
Yeah, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, we should say, which is why you're such a good guest for this subject, is involved with education and discussions and, in a sense, alternatives to the awfulness associated with operating in all of these sometimes barbaric experiments on animals when the results aren't applicable necessarily to human subjects. Isn't that right?
Well, I wouldn't say aren't applicable necessarily. I would say they aren't applicable almost universally. to the prevention, treatment, or cure of diseases in humans. The NIH has acknowledged in public statements that 95% of the animal research performed to develop treatments for human diseases fails. And by fails, I mean that after succeeding in animal tests and then progressing to human tests, either the treatments do not work or they have serious toxicities not identified by animal testing. So there could hardly be a stronger argument in favor of moving away from this animal testing to forms of testing that are more readily applicable to humans.
So, of course, then one is left with the question, why does this animal testing exist? And federally funded animal testing exists in great numbers. Why? Why is this world something that we are still talking about if it's not applicable to humans?
Well, Mark, part of the answer is that some researchers really do believe in this research, and they're entitled to their opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts, and the facts say that it doesn't work. The rest of it is...
yeah. If it doesn't make sense, it's about money, isn't it, Doctor?
The NIH alone spends nearly half of its discretionary budget, an amount of somewhere between 12 billion, that's with a B, billion, and $15 billion every year on research involving animals. The return on that investment, if you just want to be mercenary about this, is pitifully small. And Congress is beginning to take note of the fact that billions of dollars are being spent by the NIH to conduct research on animals that would just make the public's jaws drop, and not even getting a return on the investment in terms of the diagnosis, treatment, or cure of human diseases. It's a very difficult thing to stop because the forces that favor it are entrenched and have been for decades, and it's a battle that right now we are winning case by case, but eventually we have to win by acknowledging that using animals to research human diseases is ridiculous.
So it's just big money. It's an industry then, is what you're saying. And that's driving this animal research, even though there is no applicable result after all of those billions are spent.
Well, I tend to avoid absolutes. I wouldn't say it's only the money, but the money is certainly the leg of the stool that's most difficult to remove. The arguments against using animals to investigate human diseases, develop treatments for human diseases is, to a reasonable mind, irrefutable. But Congress is deeply invested in this. The pharmaceutical industry depends on it, although they would save tons of money and produce better drugs if they got away from it. Agriculture industry, and particularly the USDA, spend untold taxpayer monies to do the kind of research you were talking about, plus other kinds of egregious research, such as leaving newborn lambs in open fields unattended to see how they survive. And of course, they don't survive. They're eaten by wolves. They die of exposure and diseases and so on, and many other examples. The public, by and large, probably believes that the purpose of the USDA is to put an interpreter between the agricultural industry and the public to try to ensure that what comes out of American agriculture is safe and hopefully valuable for Americans. That's not the job of the USDA at all. The USDA is in the business of supporting American agriculture however it can. For instance, the sale of lamb in America has fallen precipitously over the last number of years, and now the USDA is conducting all kinds of egregious research to try to boost the lamb industry. So USDA is not your friend in that sense. They're not protecting the public, they're protecting the agricultural industry. Much the same holds true for some of the NIH, some of the 27 NIH institutes, for the Environmental Protection Agency, for the Food and Drug Administration, for the Department of Defense. This goes on in all of these federal agencies. It's often happening under the radar, and only when these things are exposed are steps taken to halt this waste of money, waste of time, and waste of animal lives.
Yeah, so well said. Dr. Pippin, I wish we could talk longer. We're out of time, but I want people to be aware of PCRM. Again, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, you can go to their website, pcrm.org, and there are further discussions about this world and all the work that you're doing and the people at PCRM are doing to stop animal testing. And of course, your work goes well beyond that, but that's a great place to start to learn about PCRM. Thank you for joining us today on The Conversation.
Thanks for inviting me.